Well, let's get some analysis now with William Lawrence, who joins us from Washington. He's a professor of political science at the American University. Welcome back to the program, Professor. Can I start by asking you about Vladimir Putin's top spokesman refusing to rule out the use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine? Dmitry Peskov says they could be used in the event of a, quote, existential threat to Russia. How worrying is this, considering Russia's attack on Ukraine is already about what it sees as a perceived threat to its security?
It's worrying. On the one hand, it's worrying that Russia's using sort of nuclear blackmail, not only for this operation, but all the subsequent operations if it succeeds. For that reason, Putin must be stopped in conventional sense and any other sense that's necessary in order to stop this nuclear blackmail. On the other hand, a lot of really good assessments are saying that Putin puts his own life at risk and that of his whole regime by playing the nuclear card. The deployment of one nuclear weapon basically means that he and his regime are finished because of the response that the West might deploy. And so some are calculating that he's not going to go that far. But it shows that the shortcomings of our whole nuclear doctrine during and after the Cold War, in which we had this idea of mutually assured destruction, that we keep either side from using nuclear weapons. Well, here we have an example right now where they're saying they're going to deploy nuclear weapons if need be. And the existential threat could be as simple as, I don't want NATO on my doorstep.
That's right, and we know the US and possibly other world leaders are expected to announce further sanctions on Moscow when President Joe Biden travels to Brussels for talks with NATO and G7 leaders on Thursday. He could also announce more military aid for Ukraine. I'm wondering, what do you make of this approach so far, sanctions and military assistance? Is it enough?
No, we need more of both. I haven't looked at the latest data, but last I checked, we'd sanctioned, 2 or 3 dozen oligarchs. There's about 100 that need to be sanctioned. We'd sanctioned top-level Russian officials, but not the senior mid-levels who are executing the orders. We'd gone after 70% of Russian banks, not 100% of Russian banks. And on the military side, we provided a lot, but not enough. And I think there needs to be more done in the Black Sea and the Azov Sea, more done in the skies, and more done on the ground. And in particular, 4 former heads of NATO proposed last week that we do a humanitarian evacuation of certain frontline areas of civilians who are being shot at when they try to escape. As you know, 3.5 million Ukrainians have gotten out, and there are about 10 million displaced. But there are others, including the 100,000 in Mariupol, who are hunkered down and boxed in and sitting ducks. And I think that NATO should evacuate these people on the basis of the international principle of responsibility to protect, i.e. protect civilians from being the targets of armies.
Now, Thursday's extraordinary NATO summit that's due to take place in Brussels will be a chance for the alliance to bolster the support for Ukraine. We know that the Ukrainian president's repeated calls for a no-fly zone have been rejected, but we are seeing at least one NATO member, Poland, throw its support behind the move. Is that stance likely to be reviewed at this meeting? Are they likely to discuss this idea of a no-fly zone over Ukraine?
Yes, and it will be turned down, and that's the wrong decision. I understand from a military standpoint, one of the many concerns of the no-fly zone is not only that it might provoke nuclear war, but that you would have to shoot missiles or shoot at aircraft taking off from Russian or Belarusian space, and therefore you would be attacking Russia or attacking Belarus, and that would be an escalation. But I think there's a long precedence, whether in the case of Kuwait or Libya or many conflicts, Somalia comes to mind in the early days when it was successful, the Yazidis on the mountain in Iraq, the Kurds in northeastern Syria, where these responsibility to protect principles, these no-fly zones, have been implemented to protect civilian populations without escalating conflicts. And that's exactly what we should be doing here. We should be not caring where the missiles or planes are coming from and simply putting in a defensive posture that says, you will not kill these civilians. And it takes on a certain strategic advantage as well. Until now, Putin's been drawing the red lines. I think NATO should start to draw the red lines around areas of Ukraine and saying, you will not touch these or you will suffer the consequences, and we will defend these populations. And that gives them the upper hand in the back and forth with Russia.
Okay, Professor William Lawrence, we will have to leave it there, but we appreciate your analysis as always. Thank you for that.